Hey guys, and welcome to my Terminator Genisys review. The movie has finally come out in England. I've been waiting 6 months plus for this movie, and I'm glad to announce I have my good friend BillyT800 with me to review this movie with me. Do you want to say hi, Billy?
Hi everybody, hi Andy, thanks for having me on your channel.
Not a problem, mate. So, initial thoughts. What is your initial thought? Like a general overview.
Right, well, my overall thoughts is, obviously getting into this movie, I was very apprehensive, as I was very nervous, as if people have maybe seen my last video. I was very angry at the fact that a lot of people were very critical of this movie before it even was released in the cinemas. And after watching the movie, I have to say, Andy, I actually enjoyed this film. I really enjoyed it. And maybe that's just me, but I felt entertained. I thought it was fun, and it felt like a Terminator movie. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, for me, the first half an hour was absolutely fantastic. I loved the first half an hour. But as soon as they jumped forward in time to 2017, it kind of turned into a mishmash of confusing plot holes and mediocre action scenes. And I can't remember an action scene that really stood out for me, apart from the final battle with John. That was great. I love the fight between them. Besides that, it kind of fell into just the mediocre Transformers style of action, and that was really disappointing for me. But like I said, the first half an hour, if they just kept on with the gritty feeling that they had in the first two movies, it would have been absolutely perfect. I mean, for me, the acting performances, I know everybody goes on about Jai Courtney. I thought he was okay. I mean, he was no Michael Biehn. By a long shot, he wasn't Michael Biehn, but he was okay. He felt slightly convincing to me as a Kyle Reese. Emilia Clarke was perfect as Sarah Connor. Jason Clarke was okay as John Connor. I think they could have, if Edward Furlong was available, he's 39 now. He could have come back and done it. That would have been fantastic if they'd done. When it comes to the acting side, I thought that was okay, and Arnie stole the show. Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. I mean, the one-liners he cracked were not to that point where they were cheesy like in Terminator 3. They were on point. They were just right. So Billy, what do you think of the characters from T-Genisys? How do you think the acting went?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the subject about Jai Courtney and obviously Emilia Clarke, because these two actors and actresses didn't go down too well with a lot of the fans and a lot of the public out there. But I saw Kyle Reese's character and Sarah Connor's character being played in a different way. Whereas you've got the original Michael Biehn, who played Kyle Reese in the first Terminator movie. When he came back to 1984, he knew what he was getting himself into. He was prepared, and he was under the impression he was going to deal with a very vulnerable, a very petite, waitress in the character Sarah Connor. But this version of Kyle Reese was played slightly different, because this Kyle Reese was under the impression he was going to be confronting a very vulnerable Sarah Connor. But as soon as he arrives in 1984, all hell breaks loose, and then he's not got a clue what the hell's going on. It's just constantly, what the fuck's going on here? What the fuck's happening there? Why are they doing that? Why are they doing this? And a lot of people thought he was being very whiny, but I don't think he was. I think it was just like a fish out of water, not knowing what was actually happening. He wasn't prepared for that. So I've seen a different version of the Kyle Reese character played by Jai Courtney. And then you get the same with Emilia Clarke when she played the Sarah Connor character. When you find in Terminator 1, Linda Hamilton played, as I said, the very vulnerable, sort of scared, didn't know what was going on Sarah Connor. Then you seen her playing a completely different character in Terminator 2, where she's this hardened soldier, the sort of Kyle Reese character. And then you've got Terminator Genisys version of the Sarah Connor character, where she is a mixture of the young John Connor and the battle-hardened Sarah Connor character, where she's been brought up at a very young age. And now you're finding Emilia Clarke is playing a different version of Sarah Connor. And to me, I think that's why both their performances, and obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger's performances, pulled it off. But I will agree with you, Jason Clarke is a great actor, but I wasn't all that convinced that he was a very strong John Connor. I think they could have probably got a different actor for that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like I said, Edward Furlong could have come back for the movie. But when you're saying about Sarah Connor, she feels like she's an in-between point between T1 and T2, because she doesn't have the toughness that she had in T2, because she's been raised by a Terminator. She knows she's got this Terminator there to protect her. Whereas in T1, well, T2, she didn't, so she needed to be that level above to make sure she can protect her son.
Yes.
Whereas
exactly.
in Genisys, she can fall back on the Terminator and to rely on him to protect her. She has the looks as well. She kind of does look like the younger Linda Hamilton, but more of a modernized version of her, because obviously we're not going to have the big 80s hairstyles, you know. My only gripe with her is that she's tiny, and Sarah Connor's not that small. I mean, she's 5'2". We saw her in that scene.
No.
The mugshot scene with that was awful. The cheesy music with Arnie smiling over it. I didn't like that scene.
I thought that was funny. I really did. I thought that was like a breakaway from the action, giving us a little bit of a reprieve. And I think the way they added the scene in with each character, like you say, Sarah Connor was very small, and they actually emphasised that because you just saw that her head above the camera, and then you saw Jai Courtney looked all serious, and then Schwarzenegger's character playing the Guardian Pops, obviously trying to attempt that smile. I thought that was great. I thought that was funny. I thought it was, as I say, a little bit of relief until we get to the next scene.
Yeah, I've seen some reviews already out, and there's a lot of people saying there's no chemistry between the characters. I mean, when you look at Kyle and Sarah, there is chemistry there, but it's kind of tension as well. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the first movie there wasn't any tension because she was, this innocent waitress. She didn't know what was going on, and he was the hero. But in this one, she knows what's happening, so she doesn't trust him as much, or she doesn't need him as much. So it's more like they're protecting each other, rather than Kyle's just protecting Sarah.
Yeah, I honestly loved the chemistry between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Amelia Clarke. You got that. Well, me personally, I got that sort of father-daughter feel from the character, because you saw the Terminator basically when they get into the school bus and the Terminator turns around to Sarah and says, "Seatbelt, Sarah Connor."
Yeah, I did like that. The little subtle things that make him like a father figure. I did like that.
And that whole scene where you see the Guardian, right, we'll call him Pops, okay? You see the Guardian and then you see Kyle Reese and they're loading the magazines, but they're staring at one another.
Yeah.
And it's like, what I got from that whole scene was Jai Courtney's character, Kyle Reese, is looking at this Terminator and saying, I still don't trust you. I think you could still, with the click of a finger, you could turn. And then what I got from the Pops character was he's looking at Jai Courtney saying, you better be the right guy for my Sarah Connor.
Yeah, there was that little dialogue where Kyle walks out naked, about to get in a time machine, and he just looks at him, looks down and goes, I see little that you are a fit guardian for Sarah Connor. I love that. Yes. That was hilarious, that line.
And it's little subtle things like that it stood out for me, that I thought, yeah, that is fantastic. I mean, did you notice at the beginning of the movie, do you remember in Terminator 1 when Kyle Reese first arrived, when he takes the pants off the old guy, the old drunk in the lane, it looked like he actually fell from quite a high height, and then he slammed onto the ground.
Yeah, they recreated that pretty well.
And they actually show you why he actually slammed onto the ground, because his whole body was spinning.
Yeah, he was like having a lot of trouble in that time machine compared to how we see the T800 come back in time. He's just like kneels down and does not move an inch. Yeah. Whereas Kyle's being contorted everywhere, having those new memories coming through from the alternate timeline. Mm-hmm. But that's where things start getting a bit confusing for me.
Right, I'm going to ask you this question, Andy. Right, at the very end of the movie, when, as you say, we saw the Guardian Pops fighting John Connor, and they were in the time displacement equipment, do you think the John Connor character as we know it is dead, gone, finished, finito?
Yes, because that time machine wasn't functional. So what it was just the quantum field, and that's what kills the T-3000, is the magnetics in it, and something like that. There was a lot of talk in the movie about quantum mechanics and time travel, and something about the nexus point in time, and this is where it gets confusing. Parallel timelines running across from each other. But what I want to ask you is, I have some questions that haven't been answered for me in this film, and that is, this is the original timeline, because as we see in the opening credits, we hear Kyle talking about the bombs fell in 1997, so therefore this is not the John Connor from T2. This is the original first timeline. So how could John possibly know that Kyle is his father? Because in the first timeline, unless it's an infinite loop, which is what some people are saying, that Kyle Reese was always John's father in every timeline, how would John know that he is Kyle's father if we're going off the fact that there must have been the first timeline where John's father was just an unknown person?
Somebody made a great point that the timeline is so jumbled up now in all the Terminator movies. I personally believe that timeline, the timeline where Judgment Day happened in 1997, that there has been 3 or 4 timelines before that, and I think that's the reason why John Connor knows that Kyle Reese is his father.
That would go off if Terminator 1 happened as an infinite loop, that Kyle always came back, but Terminator 2 didn't happen. Because if Terminator 2 happened in that timeline, then Judgment Day would have been postponed because they blew up Cyberdyne.
Well, do you know something? Somebody made a good point about Skynet itself in the scene where you see Matt Smith and the time displacement equipment, and it's revealed that he's actually Skynet, and then John starts going through the time displacement equipment, and then somebody said to me, well, if that character, that Skynet character, had already infiltrated the Resistance, befriended John Connor, and then worked their way up to the time displacement equipment, why did the Skynet or that Terminator not kill John Connor before they reached the time displacement equipment? But then somebody made a great point. Skynet needs Kyle Reese to go back in time. Without Kyle Reese going back in time, Skynet doesn't exist.
Yeah, people are saying that they're kind of linked together. John needs Skynet to survive. Skynet needs John to survive.
Yes, and I think that's why when you see that scene where, in this timeline, when you see Kyle Reese seeing John Connor being attacked, initially he never saw that before. He just went back in time and they arrived in 1984. He had no prior knowledge of John Connor being attacked. But in this new timeline, Skynet has realised, I can't get rid of John Connor. I get rid of John Connor, I get rid of Kyle Reese, I don't exist. Because without Kyle Reese, the Terminator won't go back in time, it won't be destroyed, they won't get the chip and the arm, then Skynet will never be. So I think, in a way, Skynet's actually saving its own future by making sure, up to that point, Kyle Reese gets sent back in time, and then, as soon as Kyle Reese is gone, it can then attack John Connor. Because, as Kyle Reese has said, killing John Connor now makes no difference because they'd already won the war. So that's the way I see it anyway. That's what I got.
Well, they haven't won the war because there was that Terminator there. Matt Smith's Terminator, which is the T-5000, which infects John with the nanobots, which becomes the T-3000. Then I have some gripe with that. If John is sent back by Skynet, what is the actual reason for John to be sent back? Maybe Skynet knows that the Guardian was sent back to 1974, and it knows that the chip will not be found in this timeline, so it has to do something else to ensure its own creation, which is why they needed to send back John. But why specifically John? Is it so he can do a job for Skynet whilst getting killed as well? So it's kind of a, they win in two ways. It just doesn't, this is where it starts not making sense to me, because I'm a massive fan of the first two films, and I look at the timelines, and the first 4 films are a very simple timeline. Timeline 1 is before T1, Timeline 2 is T1, Timeline 3 is T2, and so on and so forth. So all these events that have changed, somebody or something or Skynet must have had prior knowledge to what was going on in the past. But how? It's got to be linked to the Guardian. It has to be, because, like he said in the film, Kyle asked him, who sent you back? And he says those files have been erased. So it's got to be something to do with that. Skynet must know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Skynet is constantly getting information again in the future, and it's constantly trying to rewrite history and rewrite the future for its own well-being, because I think it knows that it's on its last legs, because, as you say, there was a Terminator sent back in 1984, it failed, so Skynet tried again. They sent another one back to 1991, it failed. So the way I see it is Skynet have realised again that they've failed, so there is a strong possibility, as you said, the files were erased, so that T800 has been sent back to the past. But they also sent John Connor back to not 2017, but they sent him back to 2000, the year 2000. Yeah.
But if he was there from 2000, surely the Guardian would have saw him, because the Guardian was also working at Cyberdyne. During them years, he got a job as construction, so he could implement Sarah's voice and handprint into the system so she could access it. So if he was building it and John Connor was there, he would have seen John. He obviously knows what John looks like because he has knowledge that Kyle and Sarah need to make, because he keeps going on about it. Have you mated yet? Have you mated yet? Which is, I think, is quite funny. But he's programmed with all this knowledge of the past, so that says to me he comes from a different timeline. But how could you go across timelines like that? It doesn't make much sense to me. I kind of just lost the plot, I suppose, at a certain point after the first half an hour, and this is where this discussion comes around of, you know, what the hell's going on. Like, Matt Smith's character kind of confused me as well. Like, he in the promo pictures was a resistance fighter. You can see him with the gun and shooting the Terminators and whatever. And then in the film, he's Skynet. In the past, he's Skynet. But then he's like the human embodiment of Skynet and infects John. But what happens to him? Has he infected him and the nanobots have spread, or has he transferred the nanobots to him?
It's a possibility that he's maybe been infected by the nanobots, and the Matt Smith character was probably initially part of the resistance with John Connor, and that's the reason why he was so close to John Connor. So when he's been infected, that's the way I assume anyway, that's how he's been able to get that close to John Connor. So when, as I say, when Kyle Reese goes back in time, that's when he goes up and actually infects. Skynet transfers itself possibly from the Matt Smith's character to John Connor. So maybe we'll see a lot more of Matt Smith. We'll see a lot more as his character. Now that Skynet's actually got a body, an actual face that can be put to the actual Skynet character, and it's no longer just this sort of essence that's out there in the ether where it's lit in one part of the city and another part of the city, and it's all over the place, well, all over the world. You can actually put a face and probably a body to the actual Skynet character as well. So we may find that Matt Smith's character could be the antagonist for the next movie, if we do get another movie.
Yeah, possibly. Skynet itself taking the form of a human, but it would still be the T-5000, I'm guessing. It's like a more advanced version of the John Connor Terminator, I guess. But yeah. I want to move on, and what I want to talk about is Byung-Hun Lee as the T-1000. I thought he was fantastic. I absolutely loved his performance as a T-1000, despite the fact he had one line in the film, which he pulled off perfectly. His mannerisms, the way he moved, the way he looked, it was Robert Patrick.
It was all over, Robert Patrick all over. Yeah. Do you know what? I'm a little bit sad that it was a very short performance for the T-1000 character, and I'm also sad as well because I would like to have seen the Arnold versus Arnold. I would love to have seen a little bit more of that.
What I would have liked to see in that is actually Arnold killing Arnold instead of Sarah killing Arnold.
It's a good thing you bring that up, Andy, because somebody had said to me as well that there was a reason why they did that. There was a reason why Schwarzenegger's sort of slightly younger T-800 approached the very young T-800, getting confused here, and told him, "You'll not be needing any clothes, I've been waiting for you," was to get him to turn around and come away from the punks, because they could have just took out that T-800 right away with the gun, the armor-piercing gun, but because he was right in front of the punks, Arnold had to create a distraction, turn the T-800 around, and then they could start the fight. And then during that fight, the Guardian was trying to get the T-800 into a position where Sarah could obviously take it out with the armor-piercing bullets. And I thought that whole scene, initially, I was sitting thinking to myself, why don't I just take him out there and then when he's in front of the punks? But they could accidentally take out the punks in the process.
Yeah, there's a number of things wrong with that scene though. I mean, I love the way they've recreated it. The CGI on the Arnie is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I have a bit of gripe with the way the punks look. I mean, the guy in the middle, he's not got the tyre track down his face. He's not convincing.
It looked CGI as well, actually. Was it just me, or did his face just look funny? It looked weird.
I don't think he was. Also, the hobo, his performance was unconvincing as well. You know, he goes, "That son of a bitch stole my pants." That's not the line. It's "That son of a bitch took my pants." That's the way it's supposed to be said. And it just sounded like he was really, you know, I just want my paycheck for this one line, so let's get on with it.
But yet, the bin lorry guy?
Yeah, the guy driving the little truck, he was spot on.
Yeah.
The guy who says, you know, he goes, "What the hell?" and then his engine cuts out, yeah. You know, he was spot on.
But yet the punks were completely different. They could have got guys or actors that looked very similar to Bill Paxton and the original two actors, but for some strange reason they did that completely different. Again, is the timeline slightly altered?
No, it was Alan Taylor just said he wanted something that looked slightly different. He said he didn't put the tire tracks down his face because he didn't like the look of it at that. I just think he should have done it though.
Yeah.
Still think he should have done it.
If you're going to recreate the entire scene at the beginning with the Terminator arriving, then surely you could just do that the same with the punks. And obviously when Kyle gets his trousers from the old down and out and the alleyway. So you're right. I don't understand why it was slightly different with those parts.
That scene where the T800 comes back, I do like it. It does look perfect. Arnie's movements is perfect. The way he says it is fine, except he goes nothing clean and then has a long pause and then says right. Where it's nothing clean, right? It's just. It flows, and they seem to have rushed it a little bit. It seemed really short, but then the fight ensues, and I think it's great the way he picks up the telescope, I suppose, and then smacks him around the head with it. And, you know, all the quarters come out everywhere. You know, that was great. Yeah. But what I don't understand is how did he know that Terminator was going to be there at that time? I'm
glad you brought that up because that was something that was bugging me as well. Because when the Terminator or Kyle Reese when they arrive back in 1984. They arrive in random places. So how the hell would the Pops character or the Sarah Connor character know that T800 was going to arrive at that specific point in time?
I guess the files have been erased. I guess they're holding onto it for a sequel. I'm sure they are.
The only thing I can think of is the Pops character still had prior knowledge before leaving the future, even though the file was erased as to who sent him back. So that's the mystery. Who sent him back? Is it a convenience for the writers just to leave that out, or are they leaving that for the sequel?
It has to be explained. They won't get away with it.
I think they will, and I think you've got a great point. It could well be Skynet protecting its future, because it failed in 1984, it failed in 1991, so now it's going to send back another Terminator, but this time erase the file, so to speak. The only thing I can think of is that Pop's character had prior knowledge of, say, a newspaper feed that 3 young punks were killed at a certain area at a certain time. Then he could put 2 and 2 together and say, well, at that specific time, that's when that Terminator was sent back.
Ah, that's a good point. It could very well be that.
Yeah. So it's like a triangulation sort of thing. They just work out the exact same time where the area is and then go to that area and then obviously take out the T800.
But they showed up at the exact time because we can see that Sarah isn't set up and ready with the rifle. She's running up the stairs and she's loading it and that. Yeah. So just another plot hole that we can debate about for hours and come to no conclusion again. We'll have to wait because I'm guaranteed there will be a sequel. They can't leave this many ends open and not do another one. There has to be at least one more.
I think there will. Did you see the mid-credit scene?
I did. Yeah, Skynet's still alive.
Yeah, I think we'd really need a sequel just to explain some of the plot holes, because the biggest plot hole that I noticed in the movie, but somebody made a good point to me, because it's a fractured timeline. And I'm sure John Connor's character explains this when they're in the car park, when they leave the hospital, that John Connor turns around to Sarah and Kyle and basically gives him an ultimatum by saying, you can either join me or I can just kill yous. But then I'm sure one of them turns around and says, but if you do that, you don't exist, blah, blah, blah. But then he says, no, because I've arrived in this timeline, it's permanent. It doesn't matter what you do, what I do to yous, I know for a fact I'm going to be safe because I exist within this actual timeline.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the ways of actually getting round the idea of, and this, as I say, this is the biggest plot hole I've got, that if 1984, when Sarah and Kyle go to the future in 2017, they never conceived, they never had sex, so why is John Connor being born then?
Yeah.
It shouldn't exist.
I think this is going off. My theory is that if you go back in time, you change an event, it creates a new timeline. And the timeline that you're currently on stays the same.
Yes, I think that's what's happened.
If that is what's happening, then Skynet's efforts every single time are futile, unless it knows of its own existence in other timelines and can communicate through timelines. If it's constantly trying to ensure its creation in another timeline, that must mean that it can communicate with itself in a different timeline. It's really weird to think about that, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, that's the only way that I can look at it. I mean, if you try and get your head around the whole paradox and time travel and all that, you end up with a sore head. And I must admit, after I've left that movie, I went to my bed and all night I was constantly tossing and turning, trying to work out the timeline and how this worked and how that fitted in with that. And I got a sore head just trying to think about it. And I thought, do you know what? Take a step back. And at the end of the day, just enjoy the movie for what it was.
That's the problem, though. It's a movie where you've got to go to it, switch off your brain, and just watch it. But that's the thing, you can't. If the action sequences were more intense, then yeah, I could do that. But it's a Terminator movie. You've got die-hard fans of this franchise. They're going to be thinking, well, this timeline, this John Connor, that John Connor. Doesn't make sense to them. But if you had more action, well, not more action, because there was plenty of action in the film, it just wasn't memorable. If it was up to that T3 action scene, I know we don't really like T3, its story is very flawed, but that action scene where he's hanging off the side of that crane and, you know, they're destroying everything, I can switch my brain off and watch that, because it's a fantastic action scene, whereas T Genisys, you can't. There is no memorable action scene apart from the fight with John at the end.
To be honest with you, I didn't get that when I was watching the movie. I really didn't. I felt, to me, this was, as James Cameron said, the sequel to Terminator 2 that it deserved. To me, it's 100 times better than Salvation, and it's a lot better than Terminator 3 because of the fact that it's not as cheesy as what Terminator 3 was, with some of the one-lines that they had, and the simple fact that they killed off the Sarah Connor character in Terminator 3, whereas this movie's basically trying to right those wrongs, and I think it did that.
Yeah, I can agree with you. It's better than Salvation, but the one thing that I looked at, you know, when the T1000 drops that bit of liquid metal into the T800's head and wakes him back up. Mm-hmm. One, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Right.
And two, the CGI on the Terminator wasn't that good. They should have used animatronics. It looked too shiny. Yeah, my only good thing about Terminator Salvation is the Terminators looks really good. Mm-hmm. I like that darker look to them. Instead of them being really shiny and chrome, they have that darker, more graphite kind of look.
Yeah, more dirty look.
Yeah, I think that looks a lot better. Whereas, you know, when it's in the flames and it turns its head and looks at Kyle, I thought, that's not the greatest CGI. But I think that was put there for the 3D.
I didn't have a problem with it, to be honest with you. I thought the CGI and the entire movie looked fantastic.
Most of it.
Yeah.
Most of it looked great. My only gripe with the CGI is when, obviously, when the T800 wakes back up, it doesn't look the greatest. But when it's chasing Kyle and trying to punch him through the floor, that was really good.
Yeah.
Like I said, I really enjoyed the first half an hour of the movie, and that was in the first half an hour of the movie. And the helicopter scene didn't look that great. You could tell the helicopters was CGI.
Yeah. It was still an interesting chase scene. I could see what they were trying to do. But you're right, that wasn't all that great. But I saw past that, I really did, because I knew that was just to get to the next scene, which was to get to, obviously, Cyberdyne's, to try and stop Skynet coming online. So I understand that was just a plot point for me at that part of the movie. So again, I just switched my brain off and just watched the action scene with the helicopters. Honestly, I looked past all the sort of slight plot holes in the movie. That one scene with John Connor being a Terminator, that didn't bother me. I thought that was really great, even though it was spoiled in the trailers. The way I saw it as well was that this is John Connor's way of getting out, because if you've seen all the movies, even Sarah Connor's character in the first movie, she basically turns around to Kyle Reese and says, I don't want this. She didn't have a choice. She's been given that choice and she's accepted it. Then it happened to the young John Connor. He's turning around to Sarah and he's turning around to the T800 and saying, why are you doing this to me? I don't want this. I don't want to be the saviour of mankind.
Even in Terminator 3, you know, he says, fuck my destiny, and puts the gun to his head. You know?
Yeah, and you get all that all the way through the movies. And then at the beginning of Genisys, you got that feeling again when it's him and Kyle are having that sort of man-to-man bromance where they're talking to one another. What would you like to do once the war's over? I would like to rebuild my house again, blah, blah, blah. And
yeah, sit back with a cold beer. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I would just like to sit down with a cold beer. That would be nice. You could tell just by his character there and then. He was tired. He was exhausted. He was pissed off. He was still at that point where he's like, why is this always on me? Why am I predestined to always be the saviour of mankind? So to me, when he became the T3000, it was like his way of releasing that pressure on him by saying, do you know what, fuck it, I've had enough. I'm going to become better than what I actually am. So I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. Not only am I going to save Skynet, but I'm going to save myself at the same time. And I think that's what I get anyway.
Yeah, but is saving himself removing himself from all the timelines? Because that's not going to happen, because at the end of the movie we see Kyle and Sarah get together, so John's birth is kind of inevitable, unless they avoid it.
It's funny you should bring that up, because do you notice at the end of the movie, after John Connor dies, they're not really that concerned about John. Sarah is only really concerned about Pops. She's worried, oh, Pops is gone, I'm never going to see him again. She wasn't worried at the fact that she lost John Connor. And then the way the movie ended, where you see them all riding off into the sunset, not once did Sarah Connor or Kyle turn around to one another and say, we need to get John back. We need to find a way of getting John back. They sort of left that open-ended. That's why I was asking you earlier on, do you think this is then completely writing out the John Connor character altogether? Because if you think about it, the year is 2017. It looks like Sarah, John and Pops are actually going to stay in 2017. And then at the mid-credit scene, we see Skynet uploading itself again. So Judgment Day could happen even further now into the future.
Oh, it will. Like, in every movie they've said Judgment Day, it will happen. There is no way of stopping it.
Well, I'm thinking the next movie could well be Skynet boots itself back up again, and then Judgment Day happens. And I believe that Pops, Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese will now be future leaders of the Resistance, because they'll have a heads up. They'll know what Terminators are all about. They'll know what Skynet's all about. But there'll be no mention of John Connor, because as you say, maybe they'll decide, do you know what? We're not going to actually have a kid. We're not going to bring a kid into this world, because this is a new timeline.
Yeah, the only problem with that is there'll be 2 Kyle Reeses.
Ah, so there will.
There'll be like, how old is Kyle in this film? He's about 29 or 28 or something?
29, yeah.
Right, so there'll be a 29-year-old, let's say, plus 10 years, 39, and then there'll be another 27, 28, 29-year-old Kyle Reese looking practically identical to him. That'll be weird. I want to move on to J.K. Simmons' character. I thought he was great. I love the fact that the 2 cops that were chasing him actually became a part of the story.
Yeah.
I did like that. I mean, you know, one of them obviously dies. T-1000 sticks a knife through his back. But the other one, who he saves his life, and then he becomes a detective and follows the case for 30 years, and he's running around going, God damn these time-traveling robots. You know, everybody would think he's absolutely mental, but he's on the right track. It kind of reminds me of the Sarah Connor Chronicles with, I think, James Ellison is his character's name, is the detective. Yes. And he's been following the case for 30 years, because they travel forward in time the same way this movie does, and he knows something's going on. You know, it kind of reminds me of that. I mean, if you guys watching this haven't seen the Sarah Connor Chronicles, go watch it. It's actually really good. Yeah,
it's a good show. I mean, a lot of earlier reviewers basically said that J.K. Simmons' character was underutilized. They didn't use him enough. But
yeah, I agree. I think he should have been in the movie more. I think he was great. He was funny.
Yeah, but I thought that to introduce him the way they introduced him was perfect, because, as I say, they tied it into what happened in 1984. So you thought, oh yeah, that's that cop. Yeah, so I can understand why he has prior knowledge of who Sarah is, who Kyle is, who Pops is. And you said that there yourself, that he mentions time travel, so he knows something iffy's going on. So, and you didn't see him die. So I'm led to believe that we could well see his character again in the next movie.
Yeah, I think they'll probably go back and find him.
Yeah, I think they will. And I don't think his character's gone. I don't think Matt Smith's character is gone either. So I think these characters were just a sort of, to help the plot along, to help the script along. And they've been added in there just to say, right, these characters exist. This is what they're there for. But eventually, we could go back to these characters again, and they could get utilised even more, because, as I say, his character now has prior knowledge as to what Skynet's all about. He could actually be part of Sarah and Kyle's future resistance to help start the resistance. Once Judgment Day kicks in again, he could be part of that.
And he'll have knowledge of past events.
Yes, exactly. So even though he's on a bit in age, he'll still have that knowledge to help anybody round about him that has no prior knowledge as to what Terminators and what Skynet's all about. He can also help them as well, because he'll be sort of like a prophet, because he'll have, as you say, prior knowledge as to what these things are all about.
Okay, so we can move on to Pops' character, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and to me, he was the guy who held it all together. You know, his one-liners were perfect. His acting, he's still got that. He's still got that Terminator presence, even after being away from the franchise for such a long time. He's still that perfect Terminator, and he's got the role better than ever. I think, you know. So you look at him in the first one, and where he's firing weapons, he's blinking, he's moving his face around. You know, in this, he takes out that shotgun and he shoots it 3 or 4 times, and he doesn't blink. His face doesn't move. It's perfect. It's like a machine would do. It's absolutely fantastic.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say the exact same thing. Terminator 1, he blinked when he shot Sarah Connor, and I believe they've done that in Terminator 2 as well. So I think having the sunglasses obviously helped when they were doing certain scenes because of the actual eye.
Oh yeah, I never thought of that. The reason that they slapped sunglasses on him so they couldn't see that. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But you're exactly right, because when you look at the younger Pop's character when he takes out the T800, Schwarzenegger looks fantastic, as you say, but I think they slightly manipulated his face a little bit to make him look slightly younger as well.
Yeah, they gave him many digital facelifts in the first half of the film before he travels to 2017, then it's just him.
Yeah, that's right, and I think as well that maybe Schwarzenegger himself managed to keep his eyes open, but you're right, that was one of the things I noticed, because if you notice in Terminator 2 and the first Terminator movie, I brought this up before as well, the scene in Terminator 1 where he takes out all the police officers in the police station, right, and he goes up to the power cable and he pulls the power cable to knock out all the lights, and you see a cop actually shoots him in the back, and when the cop shoots him in the back, you actually see Schwarzenegger squirming. He makes a facial expression where his face is squirming. And he also did that in some of the battle scenes where he's shown a little bit of emotion in his face. But in Genisys, it's like they completely eradicated that, and they showed you his facial expressions were just straight as a die. No emotion, nothing came from his face. And I thought, that is brilliant. That's actually, the movie makers, Alan Taylor himself, is actually paying attention to what was done in previous movies. And I think that's why I think Alan Taylor, as a director, has done a great job to try and tie in a lot of the little loose ends that we got in the previous Terminator movies. And we're hoping if he directs the second movie and it's successful, this movie's successful, he can obviously try and tie up all the loose ends that's in this movie.
Yeah, what the audience want to see is who sent Pops back, who sent the T-1000 back.
You know how you said earlier on about Skynet could possibly have means of being able to communicate with itself in the past and in the future?
Yeah.
Well, in the previous timeline, when the first Terminator arrived in 1984, he was trying to find out how he could track down Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese. So he went to Big Bear. He had the notebook and he had prior knowledge of Sarah being at Big Bear. Well, when that chip and the arm was finally acquired by Cyberdyne Systems, that knowledge would have been in that chip. So when Skynet...
Yeah, but the chip was smashed, it didn't work.
Yeah, good point.
They couldn't retrieve any information from it. It just accelerated the... Wait a minute, process. Actually, that shows to me that is an infinite loop, because Cyberdyne has the knowledge from the chip, limited amounts of knowledge, which means Judgment Day would have happened sooner, so 1997 is probably that Judgment Day. Whereas if they didn't have the chip, it wouldn't have happened in 1997. No, because I think that's why Terminator Genisys, it happens later on, because they've prevented what happened in 1984. Sarah and Kyle killed that Terminator, so that Judgment Day is not going to happen now. So that's why Judgment Day has been postponed, as they said in Terminator 3, further down the line. So you're right, I think it's a constant loop. It's just going to get constantly looping itself all the time. And I don't think, as you say, I think Skynet's accepted the fact that it's failed in 1984, so it's going to try other means to try and make sure it's still alive by making Judgment Day happen further down the line. I think you could get a sore head trying to work all that out. Well, it's come to light now for me, because I've always thought there has to be an original timeline, but that doesn't seem to be the case. No. I'm gonna say definitively that Kyle is always and always has been and always will be John's father, no matter what timeline you're in. It's an infinite loop.
You're bang on. I think initially Cyberdyne Systems, somewhere down the line, eventually created Skynet. And then Skynet went online, became very powerful, created a time machine, and then try. I know, but then why would you send? You would have no reason to send anybody back in time, then, would you? Oh no, sorry. You could have probably had somebody like a John Connor in the future who was able to infiltrate Skynet, take it down. Skynet knew about this, had the time machine, then sent a Terminator back to 1984 to try and take out John Connor's mother.
But if we're going off Genisys timeline here, if John never gets created in this timeline, which is what Sarah and Kyle I think are planning on doing, there will be no reason in the future to send Terminators back.
Send anybody
because there's no one to kill.
Yeah.
Unless the only reason to send a Terminator back is to ensure its own creation.
Then, would that not explain then why a T-1000 was sent back to 1974? To try and kill the very young?
Oh my god, it makes so much sense to me now. Sarah becomes the leader of the Resistance. That's why they sent the Terminator back to kill Sarah.
Yes.
It's not to kill John. It's not to kill John before he's born. It's to kill Sarah because Sarah's the leader of Resistance.
Yeah.
It's got to be. That has to be it.
That's got to be.
We've done it. We've cracked Genisys. Congratulations, Billy.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes sense now because, as I say, at the end of the movie, they gave no indication that they wanted to go back and save John Connor. So maybe Sarah and Kyle, because Kyle Reese is now in a future that he doesn't know about, because he died in the 1984 Terminator movie.
It's two timelines blended together.
Yes.
It's the original 1984 T1 timeline and the new timeline that's been created, because we see that Kyle is having memories from this timeline when it gets changed.
Yep.
So he sees himself talking to himself in the mirror saying, Genisys is Skynet, blah blah blah. So the two timelines have merged together. In the future of this timeline where Sarah and Kyle both survive with Pops, they send that new Terminator back to 1974.
74.
So it's an infinite loop within an infinite loop.
Yep.
It's fucked up and it blows my mind, but I think that's what it is. I think we understand it now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly happening.
So it's not John Connor who sent it back. It's Sarah and Kyle have sent it back. So like, we've experienced this. We need to do it. We need to do it to ensure my survival, because I'm the leader of Resistance. Me being Sarah Connor,
So you'll probably find in the next movie, because the year's 2017, Skynet is still in its infancy. So we might find in the next movie that's when Judgment Day happens.
But it's not in its infancy, because we see in the post-credit scene, we see the full Matt Smith character looking at Genisys, looking at Skynet. Sorry. So that's still an adult, because we see it grow from being a child very, very fast into being Matt Smith. So it's still there. They destroyed Genisys. They destroyed the time displacement equipment. But they didn't destroy Skynet's core.
Skynet. Yeah.
Because, like they were saying, that place where the time displacement equipment is in LA. And we see that in the future. It's the same building. But the other team who's off destroying the core, what unit did they say that was? The Colorado unit or something?
Yeah.
So obviously that core is in Colorado. So they haven't destroyed Skynet. They should have known that. Kyle should have known that. They needed to go to Colorado to destroy the core. So the core is still there.
Yeah, I think Skynet has got the capability of being in different places. Like Ultron. Somebody made a good analogy about that. Like the Ultron character, it can be in different bodies and be in different places at the one time.
Yeah, the internet is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, exactly. And if one part of that bit of Skynet gets destroyed, it can just move itself to another body and obviously start running things from that point of view. And I think you're right, when Colorado got destroyed, Skynet transferred itself to, say, the LA branch, and then that's when it tried to take out John Connor. But if it had got destroyed there, it would have probably just moved itself somewhere else and just rebuilt itself from there. So I think you're just going to find that Skynet is just constantly going to reboot itself. And you might find in the next movie, that's when Judgment Day happens. Sarah and John are like shite, but it's going to be a little bit further now into the future. So a wee bit further down the line, that's where I think Sarah, Kyle and Pops will now be the leaders of the future Resistance. And then a future Skynet will then send a machine, a T-1000, all the way back to 1974. And that's when, as you say, the future Kyle or the future Sarah, whoever the case may be, sends that T-800, the Pops character, all the way back to 1974, but erases its file to protect the person who sent it back.
Yeah, so they don't know that their future becomes them being the leaders of the Resistance. Yeah. So they haven't been told that you don't need to conceive John, because they would know that this is going to happen.
Yeah, maybe this.
And they probably wanted it to happen in a different way. Yeah. Therefore, protecting those files would maybe make it happen a different way. I don't know. Maybe John wouldn't have got infected, or they find a way to reverse it so the timeline resets itself.
I don't think they'll go down that road now. I really don't, because I think the new timeline is now going to start from 2017 onwards. And I think the loop is now starting from 1974. I think the 1984 timeline has been completely eradicated. And I think Sarah is going to accept the fact that she's going to start taking on this fight and not put it on her son John Connor, because I think she feels it in a way herself. It was forced on him. He had no choice. It was forced on him, but she's accepted it. She seems to have accepted the fact that she's got a battle to win. She's got to take something on, and I think that's why things will start stirring up again, hopefully in the next movie, and it'll be Sarah and Kyle this time, who are now the sort of heroes of the new timeline, so to speak.
I think Pops mentioned something about timelines linking together. Instead of being parallel, they kind of cross over. Which means John's future crosses with Sarah's past, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know, they're one and the same now.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think, as I say, John Connor himself actually points that out. I'm sure that's what he's talking about. That's the way I interpret it anyway. That's what he's talking about when they're in the car park. He's basically saying it doesn't matter what we do now to affect the future, because I'm here. And even if I wipe you out, if I kill you, I'm in this precise moment in time. I can't be erased now because I'm here. It's happening. That is it. So, I know it sounds confusing, but that's the way I see it anyway.
It does get confusing, but if we can go to the simple explanation that the future that we'll get from Terminator Genisys is Sarah and Kyle being the leaders of Resistance, Skynet sends a T-1000 back to kill Sarah. Sarah sends a T-800 back to protect her, who becomes Pops, and then the 1984 timeline in between those two times is eradicated, but the events will change. There might be like a Terminator 2 of Genisys, if you know what I mean, where Sarah is a 12-year-old girl and another Terminator is sent back to kill her. Maybe like I don't know, they could do another version of the TX, because the TX is interesting.
Talking about the TX, I think that's what Arnold Schwarzenegger's character is now. He's like
I actually said that. Yeah, when I was talking to my girlfriend about it, I said he could be a TX now, because instead of it completely taking over, it's just the liquid metal's gone over his endoskeleton, hence why he's still big and bulky. Because a T-1000 would have no reason to be big and bulky, he would shrink down.
Did you read recently that Schwarzenegger actually came out and said that he has signed up to do the next movie if we get a sequel?
Yeah, I did, but it's a matter of whether the film does well. They won't make one if it doesn't do well.
Exactly. You never know, but I'm definitely going to buy it in Blu-ray when it comes out, because it's a definite must for me.
Yeah, I will as well. Mainly because I want to watch it a few times, try and wrap my head around it. But what I need to do is watch it again and not think about the timelines throughout the film, because that's what I was thinking of. Like, how is this there and this that? Oh, fuck it. Yeah, you know, I'm just gonna eat my popcorn, you know.
Yeah, because you try to put all the Terminator movies together, you would scramble your brain. You really would, because all the timelines. If Terminator Genisys is as we thought, I think it's connected to Terminator 3 as well, because as you say, I think there was some references from Terminator 3 used in this movie. There was the reference that at the beginning, when we hear Kyle Reese doing the monologue, instead of the Sarah Connor character doing the monologue, it's Kyle Reese this time, and he actually mentions this prophet. John Connor is being hailed as this prophet. They mentioned that in Salvation as well, so there was little things that they were taken from each movie.
I don't think Terminator 3 was referenced, because if you look at the way the future plays out in Terminator 3, the T-850 says, "I killed you," whereas in Genisys that doesn't happen. I think T3 is completely erased as well.
See, when you think about it, but yeah, it could be, but when you think about it, see if they hadn't did that reveal, that spoiler in the trailer that John Connor was a Terminator, and we just saw the Terminator shoot John Connor, then everybody would automatically assume, oh, that's the scene for Terminator 3 where he tells his younger self, "I shot you, I killed you." That could have been that scene right there. And automatically the audience...
Oh shit, yeah. Technically he did kill him.
Yes.
But it was a different way, because he said he was chosen because his model number attachment to his boyhood experiences. Yeah. Whereas this John Connor didn't have those boyhood experiences, because this is the Terminator 1 timeline John Connor. T2 never happened for him.
So technically, in a way, they're referencing T3 in a slightly different way by saying, yeah, that future Terminator killed John Connor. And,
Well, actually, no, because this is a T800. In T3's T850.
Ah, yes, so it is.
Alright, so, overall, you said that you would give this movie a 8 out of 10, did you say?
8.5.
8.5. Me, personally, I would give this a 6.8. That's odd. I'd give it a 6.8 for the main reason that the first 30-40 minutes is fucking awesome. I love the action, I love the T1000, I love the recreated scenes, and then after that, it kind of falls on its own ass. I mean, the action scenes are okay to mediocre, the acting's okay. For the main reason that I just can't pinpoint anything that really stood out apart from the first 30 minutes. But it's still better than Terminator 3, story-wise.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely better than Salvation, because that was trash. It's nowhere near as good as T2 or T1.
No, it's never going to be. We're never going to get that uniqueness that we got from Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. They are, as they say, hidden gems. But if we can get as close enough to that as we possibly can, then I'm happy. And I was happy after seeing this movie. As I say, I was extremely nervous before the movie started, but I was happy, and I think that's the reason why I gave it such a high rating. And I would recommend anybody out there, just go out and see it for yourself, see what you think.
And the only reason I give it the rating that I give it is because of the confusion. If you go and see this film as just not a Terminator fan, just a summer blockbuster action movie, I also don't think you'll be very impressed, because you need to be a Terminator fan to understand this film.
See, to be perfectly honest with you, I thought if you're a non-Terminator fan, I think the action was solid enough to entertain you. I really do.
Yeah, to entertain you, but there was no real scene that stood out for me. Apart from the final fight between John and the Pops, because that was brilliant. I love that fight.
What about the whole scene where they're in the school bus and they're trying to cross the Golden Gate Bridge?
Yeah.
I thought that was a great scene as well.
Too many camera changes. I was like, oh, I like that shot. Oh, wait, you've changed it. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You know.
well. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got different opinions, and that's just the way you feel about it, and that's the way I feel. But I mean, 6.8 is still a good score, considering that some of the reviews out there are only giving it a 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
Some are giving it a 2 out of 10. You go, seriously?
Okay, we're going to wrap this up here. So, overall, your rating, 8 out of 10. My rating, 6.8 out of 10. We can hope for a sequel, because I think it needs one, more than anything. Not just because it is a decent movie, because it needs explaining. They need to move on and explain. That's really important for me to get the answers for Pops being sent back. So that's really important for me. But yeah, we're going to wrap this up here, guys. So thank you very much, Billy, for coming on my channel and doing this discussion, review, timeline, mindfuck. I really appreciate it. So is there anything you want to say to finish this off?
No, it was an absolute pleasure, sir. I'm looking forward to doing something like this again in the future. Let's hope we're not waiting too long if we get another Terminator movie, but we could obviously discuss other movies as well that maybe take our fancy this year or next year.
Well, thank you, Billy. I will leave a link to Billy's channel in the description. I will also link the Genisys IMDb page in the description. And thank you so much for watching, guys. And once again, I know I said this in my last video, but thank you so much for 200 subs. Take it easy, guys, and I'll see you next time.